Hey everyone, it's Lexi. So in today's video I'm going to be sharing with you all the books that I ended up reading in September. So I will say September was quite an unimpressive just reading month. I read a total of 2 books. I think cumulatively they were over 1,000 pages, but it was just a crazy month. So I started my last year of my master's, so I was busy with that. I have a tutoring job, and then I also was offered a RA position, like a research assistant position, so I've been just busy with everything. And I still always save time to read at the end of the day at bedtime, like 50 pages or so, but you can, like, you'll see the books that I mentioned in here, they were pretty much mediocre. I wasn't really invested in them, and I felt like, especially one in particular, it just took forever. It took me like over 2 weeks to like read it, just because it was so dragging on. But yeah, so all the books that I mentioned here I have reviews for, so I will link them down below and also in the cards, so you can go check that out if you're interested, where I get into more detail and some side notes too. I also will be doing kind of incorporating a kind of music, movies, and TV show wrap up that will be up on Wednesday, so keep your eyes peeled out for that. I thought that'll be something fun to include because I always kind of talk about music and movies and like my hauls and all that. So without further ado, let's just hop into this video. So the first book that I ended up reading this month was the Tales and Teacups book club pick for September, and it was Secrets of a Charmed Life by Susan Mesner. And this was a book, actually Susan Mesner was the first author that I chose for the first book ever that I did for my book club for Fall of Marigolds, and I really loved that, so I had really high expectations going into this. This is kind of a dual storyline where basically this girl, for her history assignment, has to interview someone who survived the Blitz in London during World War II. So she ends up interviewing Isabel, who kind of tells her about the story about a girl named Emmy who was 15 years old, living in London with a younger sister and a mother, and just kind of her story surrounding the Blitz and how Emmy in particular had really high ambitions. She wanted to design and make wedding dresses, so she's trying to kind of follow her dream with that when basically all this is going around, and just how she and her sister end up being sent out to the country, to like the countryside, to make sure that they're okay, and then something terrible happens and that changes everything from like life as she knew it. So I will say that the first kind of third of this book really I found to be very irritating, especially Emily in particular. She's kind of described as a very kind of like, she's a very self-centered 15-year-old. She doesn't really comprehend or see how her actions impact those around her. And there are several times where I just had to put down my book and be like, oh, she's so irritating, just how she acts around people, just the decisions, and how she has a total disregard to how what she does impacts others. So that was really irritating. But once kind of like the big like plot twist in here, I really was gripped for like this middle chunk of the book. Like, I really enjoyed reading it, and just the storyline I felt was very gripping, and just how the shift in it. And then kind of like the last like third or so was kind of written in journal articles, so it was, or like journal, like diary entries, so I felt like that kind of lost some of the momentum here. But overall, like I said, it was a really good book. Once you get past kind of like the first initial, like part 1, actually it's like, let's see, I'll show you real quick, where it's like part 1. But basically once you get past part 1, the book does get really interesting, and I was really invested in it after at that point. I love how we really got kind of like an up close and personal experience with London during the Blitz during this time. I think it's a really interesting kind of pivotal point in history, and just how people even survive that is just amazing. So just kind of reading from that standpoint was just really good. So this book was overall, at the end I really enjoyed it, and looking back, and just kind of like the overall message of this book, and how the decisions that you have, like if you're at like a crossroad, and just kind of making the decisions and just coming to terms with the fact that the decisions that you do impact others. And there was this one quote that is also in my Goodreads review that I had for it, that I'll kind of read you here as well. I want her to view me as I stand at the end of my existence. I want her to see that I understand that there are no secrets to a charmed life. There is just a simple truth that you must forgive yourself for only being able to make your own choices and no one's else. So I think that was just a really good summary of what the book is about. So this is not my favorite of this author. I still think A Fall of Marigolds is a lot better. But I think if you are into historical fiction, I think this one would be a good kind of diverse read for you to pick up. So I kind of gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And lastly, I then read this mammoth of a book, Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas, which is like the 6th book in the Throne of Glass series, but I honestly just consider it 5.5 basically because it takes place during the same time frame that Empire of Storms does. It just follows Chaol, who is off onto the southern continent. So I have a full kind of like review of what I thought about this book, but I'll kind of just keep it really basic here. So if you want to know more about it, go check out that video because I get pretty heated about it. So I have not really enjoyed the direction that this book series has taken. I really loved the first 2 books, and then I think Crown of Midnight is the best. But after kind of Heir of Fire, I feel that's when like kind of the series really goes downhill, just in terms of like where the characters are going and just kind of how the author chose to handle some of these situations. So this is a series that I've kind of been sticking with because I'm like, I've made it through this far, I might as well just continue with it, because I do find that there are aspects up here that are definitely problematic and I'm not really happy with the storyline. So this is like the last book before the final one, so I was like, I need to read it. First of all, this book I feel like is unnecessarily long. It's just under 700 pages, and I feel like this book is just 300 to like 400 pages, way too long. For the first like 3/4 of the book, like nothing happens at all. Like it was just, took me forever. It took me over 2 weeks to read this book because it just dragged on and it was dry as a desert that they were in on the southern continent. And like I said, like it just dragged on. It was clear from the beginning that Yrene, who was the healer that was mentioned in The Assassin and the Healer and the Assassin's Blade novella bind up, was going to be Chaol's love interest from the beginning. And I think it's really problematic in terms of how the author will describe these 2 characters. In particular, Chaol is described as very masculine and like, you know, with his ripping abs, hard like washboard abs, and like his muscles on his back and all that stuff. And then Yrene has been described many times as having like a very slim waist but very bulging boobs, which I think is just really problematic. You can tell early on that the only reason this book is 400 pages, like nothing happens for 400 pages, is because she's trying to build this relationship with Yrene and Chaol, and I was not a big fan of that. I will say though that the last kind of chunk of this book, like the last like 150 pages, it was when the kind of like the main overarching mystery of like Erewhon kind of gets revealed. So I really enjoyed that, and it kind of made me, I got a similar feeling that I had when I was reading Crown of Midnight. So I really enjoyed that, and kind of like some parts in here made me really roll my eyes just in terms of Yrene and Chaol, and just, I don't know, I don't really like that. But yeah, the last like little chapter kind of gives you a glimpse into what we'll be seeing in the last book, which I'm very looking forward to just because I just want this series to be over. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with it, but I gave it kind of 3 out of 5 stars. I neither loved it nor hated it, but it was just okay. If I were you, like I would just maybe start at like, let's see, I'd maybe start at page like 450 and then just read there, because, or even just read the chapter where all is revealed and then, you know, you'd be good, or just read the summary online. But yeah, basically, I don't know, I felt this book was just very unnecessary in terms of how big it was, and not a lot happened in the first 400 pages, so it was just meh. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what some of the books you've read this month were and what you thought about some of the ones that I've read if you've read them. So yeah, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.